So, have you noticed that foxes have developed quite an infamous reputation over the years? Every time we see these cat-like canids on screen, we can expect them to play a certain role. I mean, in every piece of media out there, they are either the trickster hero or they are the trickster villain. I tried to think of other examples, but it was useless. Though the roles change, they only change at a superficial level. For this reason, a fox is almost always described with one of the three C's: cunning, clever, or crafty. But where did this all begin? Foxes couldn't have always been attached to these adjectives, could they? Foxes have been found in mythology, legends, and folklore from all over the world. So I'm sure they have played a different role other than trickster. After all, there are 23 species of foxes out there, so they cannot all show the same traits, right? And yet, at some point, someone, somewhere, must have noticed this animal's skittish, sneaky behavior and named it a trickster. I think it would be fun finding the origin of the trickster fox, or at least some ancient form of it. I also think it would be fun to search and categorize other roles that the fox has represented across cultures and time. But first, a bit of a disclaimer. A lot of legends have been shared orally for an indeterminate amount of time before being written down, giving birth to many versions of the same story. Also, because folklore was passed down orally, it's difficult to pinpoint the exact time of creation. For this reason, a close approximated date will be used, taking into account, of course, history, tradition, and perhaps even archaeology. Well, with all of that out of the way, please join me on this strange journey as we attempt to solve this random conundrum and hopefully learn something new about everyone's favorite trickster animal. If we wish to find the origin of the trickster fox, a bit of research is in order. We will begin with the most recent known fox myth or legend from each continent and work our way backwards. This particular video will focus on North and South America, starting with the former. Now, as I mentioned before, we will pay attention to all the archetypes we encounter. That way, at the end, we can have a nice table of categories we can look at and make comparisons. Let's begin, shall we? Our earliest piece of folklore comes from the American South, around the year 1881. Joel Chandler Harris published a compilation of stories which he collected from Southern Black Americans, and who previously passed them down orally. These were known as the Uncle Remus stories. The fox character, Br'er Fox, is the main antagonist of these stories. He claims to be the smartest creature in the forest. This, however, is disproven repeatedly, as he is constantly being outsmarted by Br'er Rabbit. There are way too many stories to talk about, and some are just downright controversial. But the fox character goes from succeeding in capturing the rabbit, which doesn't last long, to being victimized by him. For this reason, Br'er Fox is the first in the category of outfox fox. Our next story surfaced in the year 1875, when it was published in the children's magazine, St. Nicholas Magazine, based in New York City. This story is none other than the Gingerbread Man fairy tale. If you're not familiar with this story, it's very simple. A gingerbread man comes to life, perhaps because he was baked by a woman who longed for children, or maybe because fairy tales don't follow reality too closely. Well, in any case, the gingerbread man runs away, taunting anyone, human or animal, who tries to catch him and eat him. But then, a fox manages to snatch him by feigning disinterest or deafness, luring the gingerbread man closer and closer until the walking dessert is gulped down. This fox has a quick mind and even quicker reflexes, and without a doubt, displays the common traits of a clever trickster.
Yay!
We're now gonna skip over to the mid-17th century. And just as a side note, from here on out, the dates are gonna get a bit vague. I'm sorry. Well, regardless, our next fox myth comes from the Ojibwe people in northern USA and southern Canada. It's an epic-style story, like that of Beowulf or the Odyssey. It's also quite popular amongst other tribes, like the Cree and Innu, with some minor changes added to it. It is the legend of Iyash, son of Iyash, and his journey and struggle to return home. So, the story kinda goes like this. Iyash the father has two wives, one of them being the younger Iyash's mother. Yes, I know, it's a little confusing. Just bear with me. The other wife hated younger Iyash and lies to her husband, telling him that Iyash was planning to overtake him. The elder Iyash takes his wife's side and leaves his son stranded on an island while on a hunting trip. And that is how Iyash begins his long journey home, in the hopes of reuniting with his family and returning to his once peaceful life. On the way, he encounters a fox woman, an old lady who can shapeshift into a fox. She gives him advice and items that end up saving his life during certain trials. No tricks, no betrayal, just wholesome guidance. It is no wonder then why another name for the fox woman is Grandmother Fox. For all these reasons, the Ojibwe fox woman is the first one in the category of benevolent spirit. I found it fascinating just how many roles the fox plays in Native American culture and mythology. For example, the Shoshone-Bannock people have a story explaining why foxes should never be hunted or killed. This story goes like this. The Shoshone-Bannocks lived happily until they were attacked by vicious warriors known as the Little People. Desperate for help and not knowing what else to do, the tribe elected a medicine man to venture out and seek answers on how to defeat the Little People. He does so, and in the process, he finds a wolf, a fox, a bobcat, and a cougar, said to have the head and hands of a human. The spirits tell the medicine man that they will help his tribe under one condition, that the Shoshone-Bannocks must never hunt or kill or eat wolves, bobcats, cougars, and foxes. The medicine man agrees, and the four spirits send down lightning bolts, killing the Little People. This fascinating story exposes a new set of foxes that not many people get to see, because in the point of view of the Shoshone-Bannocks, foxes are considered to be a good omen. And that is the new category we will be adding to the table. The next myth comes from an area spanning from the Midwest to the Northeast USA, where the Iroquois Confederacy was established. This story is called The Hungry Fox and the Boastful Suitor. As you may have guessed, it's about a hungry fox who, while contemplating where to find food, hears a man sing arrogantly about himself, his courage, his nice clothes, and his strength. The fox realizes the man was carrying a bag full of fish to take to the woman he wished to marry, so the little critter comes up with a plan. The fox plays dead, and the suitor picks him up, debating whether to skin him or not, as the Iroquois prize the fox skins very much. In the end, the suitor decides to take the seemingly dead fox with him and skin him later, as to not ruin his nice clothing. He places the animal in the same bag as the fish and carries on, loudly singing his song. The fox rips a hole through the bag and lets the fish fall to the ground one by one before jumping out. When the suitor arrives at his potential bride's home, he sings his boastful song until a crowd forms around him. But when he reaches into his bag, he finds nothing. Humiliated, the suitor leaves the village, still single. This fox is the epitome of a trickster, who will use all his smarts for a quick and easy meal. Plus, there's the added bonus of humbling a prideful person. Now, here's where a couple of issues started to arise. You see, cultures and oral traditions can vary widely, not just in a single region, but also in a single community. Take the Apache Nation, for example. With it consisting of several tribes, it wasn't surprising to find two opposite opinions of foxes in their stories. The first opinion or archetype is quite common in folklore. Foxes are portrayed as gullible creatures, easily misled by other much smarter animals. One particularly brutal story left me feeling quite sorry for the critter. In it, a fox sees a doe with two spotted fawns. The fox is charmed by the fawn's fur and asks the deer how she made her children with that coloring. The doe quickly answers that she placed her children in front of a fire, and the sparks thrown off burn the spots on the fawn's fur. The fox decides to try this method with his own children, but when his kids did not change color, he pushed them into the fire and covered them with ashes. When the fox pulled his kids out of the now dead fire, expecting beautiful spotted children, he instead found his offspring charred, black and dead. The fox attempts revenge against the mother deer and her children by setting their grove on fire, but the family escapes. The fox continues to cry for the loss of his children even to this day. The second archetype in Apache legends comes from the story on how the fox stole fire and gave it to the world. The legend says that a long time ago, all animals could talk and were peaceful with each other. Well, after some mishaps, a fox ends up in Firefly Country. Upon arriving, the fox notices they have a giant fire burning in the center, and so he decides to steal some. The fox befriends the fireflies and calls for a dance, to which the fox will provide the music. He ties a stick to his tail and creates the first drum. While everyone is having a good time and the insects are distracted, the fox sets the stick on fire and runs for it. The fireflies give chase, but the fox spreads the fire everywhere by giving it to other animals. And eventually, the Apache Nation learned how to use it to advance their society. Because the Apache Nation is so diverse, I decided to include both archetypes. So, both the categories of Outfox Fox and Clever Trickster will be added. The Menominee people also have a clever trickster in a famous story, in which a fox tricks a wolf by trapping him in a frozen pond. This allows the fox the chance to run and eat the sugar maple they both coveted. In the case of some northern Californian tribes, like the Achomawi and the Atsugewi, the world was created by a spirit known as Silver Fox. This creator god, along with his companion Coyote, makes an appearance in several myths. In Atsugewi's creation tale, Silver Fox came forth from fog, while Coyote came forth from a cloud. They lived on a canoe on an endless sea. Eventually, after growing tired and bored, Silver Fox created land, vegetation, and animals. Meanwhile, Coyote was usually portrayed as lazy or mischievous, like when Silver Fox created humans, which he did by whittling sticks. Coyote took too much of an interest in the newly created women and chased after them, but before he could reach them, all the new humans turned back into sticks and shavings. Coyote's antics frustrated Silver Fox so much that in another Atsugewi story, Silver Fox attempted to trap and kill his companion. This was a very bad idea, and the creator god just barely managed to save himself from Coyote's wrath by pretending to be sick and turning Coyote's attention to the newly created fruit trees. Another story speaks of Silver Fox's kindness for his creations, like when all the animals pleaded that they were too cold and hungry to go on. His response was to end winter, thus establishing the seasons. And it is because of all of this that we have no trouble placing Silver Fox in the category of benevolent spirit, the second entry in this video. We head over to the lower parts of North America, where the Tzotzil people settled into present-day Chiapas. The following information is not quite a legend or a myth, but a linguistic observation. You see, the Tzotzil language is just one of the many branches belonging to the Mayan language family. It's the most spoken language in Chiapas besides Spanish, and it has 6 dialects. And what caught my attention were the negative connotations foxes have in the Tzotzil language. For example, according to Robert Laughlin's Great Tzotzil Dictionary of San Lorenzo, Sinacantan, the word fox is translated as vet. Latin name, that. But what's really interesting is the entry. Foxes are eaten, seasoned with coriander. Their flesh is cold. A fox skin is stuffed to represent the President of Mexico. Is this a good thing? Their bark is believed to announce disputes, sickness, broken bones, or murder on the road. No, I guess not. Foxes are said to be the companion animal spirits of stupid people. Yikes. Or how about this entry, which I'm not gonna bother trying to pronounce, which literally means hour cutter. A witch, weasel, fox, or whippoorwill that crosses one's path and calls out. Also a fearfully ugly thing. It's not as disparaging as the previous entry, but it really cements the idea that the Tzotzil people really don't like foxes. And it's really because of this that we will be adding our first entry in the category of bad omen. We are finally done with North America, and believe it or not, we did not include all the information we had due to time constraints. So if we didn't mention your favorite fox story in this video, please let us know in the comments. We would love to read them. Now we are ready to move on to South America and try to figure out if they have a few trickster foxes somewhere. Our first story comes from the Huarochirí manuscript, which is a compilation of stories in classical Quechua belonging to the indigenous people of Peru. It was compiled sometime in the 16th century, though it is important to note that all the stories have been passed down for many generations prior to being written. The story that caught my attention was the tale of Cuniraya, a waka, also spelled wak-a, which means venerated deity. He could perform miracles with just a simple touch, or change reality by just speaking. And yet, Cuniraya preferred to disguise himself as an old humble beggar. One day, he encounters Cahuilan, a beautiful maiden sleeping under a fruit tree. He is immediately struck by her beauty, so he inseminates a ripe fruit and lets it fall next to her. Cahuilan eats the fruit and becomes pregnant. When she gives birth to a boy, she gathers all the wakas and demands to know who fathered her son. When no one comes forward, Cahuilan lets the boy crawl to his sire, who of course is a disguised Cuniraya. Cahuilan is devastated that such a lowly man impregnated her, so she takes her son and runs off towards the ocean. Cuniraya reveals his true self, but it's too late. He pursues after them both, asking animals for help. Despite all of this, Cahuilan reaches the ocean, and she and her son transform into islands. As a consequence, Cuniraya blessed all the animals that helped him, and cursed those that were unsupportive. I'm sure you can tell where this is going. If you guessed that the fox was cursed for being unsupportive, you are correct. The fox was cursed to be hated by humans, and to be discarded like garbage if killed. So long story short, foxes are not considered evil, but they are still to be avoided. This is why we will be adding the Huarochirí fox to the bad omen category. We move on to the Moche people, also from Peru. The society flourished sometime around 100 CE, much earlier than the Incas. For the Moche people, foxes were quite significant and were often immortalized in art, particularly ceramics. One example being the famous stirrup spout bottles, like this one, or these ones. Some of these foxes are humanized, appearing as warriors, priests, or runners. Others depict realistic foxes, usually wearing headdresses. But why were foxes given so much attention? Well, we will first need to explain Mochica society, which was strictly divided by class. At the very top is the king, known as the Siequish, which I probably mispronounced, and he was said to be a descendant of the gods. Under him was the Koriek, the previous king, who was defeated in battle by the new king. After that were the priests, who had great power over the population, as they had knowledge in astronomy, architecture, medicine, and metallurgy. The commoners were next. These included farmers, fishermen, and soldiers. Beneath them, and at the very bottom, were the prisoners of war. And why is this relevant, you may ask? Well, priests were represented by, you guessed it, a fox. According to some scholars, Moche priests deemed foxes powerful due to their speed and nocturnal habits, which associated them to the world of the dead. Priests were also said to consume hallucinogenic cacti in order to gain the ability to transform into animal spirits, such as the fox. There is so much more to say about the Moche people and their relationship with foxes. I mean, I haven't even talked about the mural depicting the fox-headed snake. But time is running out, so let's just move on and put the Moche fox in the good omen category. Our focus goes next to the Aymara people, whose society ranged throughout Argentina, Chile, Bolivia, and Peru. The Aymara fox myth we are looking for has two variations, but are essentially the same. It starts out with a fox and another crafty animal, like a rabbit or a monkey. We're gonna go with a monkey for this one. The two animals are hungry, so they infiltrate a house, but they get caught by a servant. The fox manages to get away, but when he returns for his friend, he sees the monkey in a cage, crying in despair. The monkey says that he will be forced to marry a young maiden against his will. The fox offers to trade places, which he does. But when the humans return, they bring a pot of boiling water. The fox is scalded, and he realizes he was tricked. He runs away, vowing revenge. But again and again, the monkey evades him with other tricks. Finally, after a long chase, the fox finds the monkey eating cheese. The fox is starving by now, and begs the monkey to tell him where he got it. The monkey points to a large pond, where the moon is reflected, and tells the fox that it is where he will find the cheese. Deciding to trust the monkey one last time, the fox swims. But this time, the monkey's treachery ends his life. I'm sure this Aymara legend used to teach kids not to be so gullible, but yikes, I would have hated this story as a child. Well, anyway, this poor fox wasn't clever enough to understand he was being taken advantage of, until it cost him his life. This easily puts him in the outfox fox category. We are finally on our last entry for this video, much to everyone's relief, I'm sure. Spread throughout South America, though mostly centered in Peru, the Andean civilization is our oldest entry, not just for this continent, but for the video as a whole. We're looking at a specific place, an architectural wonder known as the Buenavista's Temple of the Fox. It is said to be constructed around 2200 BCE, an impressive accomplishment for a culture with no beasts of burden, aside from llamas and alpacas. What's special about the Buenavista's Temple of the Fox, besides its great size, was its observatory. It is the oldest of its kind in the New World, and it allowed priests to observe solstices, lunar eclipses, and most importantly, the constellations. The temple gets its name for two reasons. First, there is an engraving of a fox at the entrance. And second, researchers have reasoned that the main focus of the observatory was to track the very special Fox constellation. It apparently begins to rise before sunrise on December 21st and is fully risen after sunset on March 21st, the beginning of spring. What's really interesting is that for the Andean people, the fox symbolized water, cultivation, fishing, and seasonal changes. Offerings of coca leaves and tobacco were found in a chamber located next to the observatory, possibly in exchange for a good harvest. Now, when you think of foxes, you normally wouldn't associate them with crops or weather. So how did this happen? Well, it was said that a long time ago, a fox found a rope leading up to the clouds. Curious, he climbs it. He finds a paradise of wonderful foods and animals and begins to eat everything on sight. Climbing down is difficult, so he spits out all the food he consumed, filling our world with new animals, both marine and terrestrial, as well as new crops. It seems like the gods did not punish the fox for this transgression, and instead turning him to something like an envoy, establishing a connection between heaven and earth. In fact, it is believed that the offerings found in the temple were there so that the fox, as the constellation, could judge their adequacy and report it to the gods, who would then bless the people with a fruitful harvest. Well then, it's a no-brainer. The Andean fox is clearly a good omen, right? Well, when you think about it, this fox isn't all too different from the Apache fox who stole fire and gave it to the world. After all, isn't stealing commonly attributed to foxes? Most stories paint them as common thieves. Or perhaps a fox's scavenger nature inspired these stories. Either way, the Andean fox is the oldest story of this sort, at least in the New World. So, yay? Did we do it? Did we find the oldest trickster? I think we did, but I leave it up to you. This video is already way too long, and you probably already heard the word fox so much you don't even know what it means anymore. But I still hope you found this entertaining enough to stick around for part 2. Afterwards, we can discuss the origin of the trickster and all the other archetypes. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.